Just before sunrise, when most of the world was still fighting off sleep, Fort Dix Federal Correctional Institution felt unusually tense. It was Thursday, November 20th, the kind of cold morning where even the air seemed to hold its breath. No one inside the prison yet understood how historic this day would become, especially not the man whose life was about to crumble before breakfast, Sean "Diddy" Combs. The routine morning sweep began the same as every day. Boots echoed across the concrete floor. Flashlights sliced through dim corners. Clipboards clicked as officers checked off standard inspection boxes. Most inmates barely opened their eyes. They'd seen this drill 1,000 times. But then the officers stopped. Not slowly, not casually. They froze in synchronization, like they all sensed at the same moment that something wasn't right. They had reached Diddy's bunk. One guard lifted the mattress. Another crouched low and reached beneath the steel frame. The officer's hand paused, then carefully pulled out a towel-wrapped bundle wedged between cold metal and thin springs. He unrolled it slowly. And that was the moment everything detonated. Inside the towel sat a bottle. Not a store bottle, not something anyone smuggled in from outside. This one was filled with a cloudy, pale liquid that carried a sharp, sour smell that had no business being inside a federal prison. A smell that screamed fermented sugar, home-brewed alcohol, contraband. The officers exchanged looks, serious ones, heavy ones. They weren't surprised. They weren't confused. They knew exactly what this meant. And they also knew exactly who possessed it. Cameras were immediately pulled out. Photographs taken from every angle, evidence bags zipped open, radios crackled urgently with calls to the warden. Within minutes, the calm morning turned into controlled chaos. Still half asleep inmates sat up in their bunks, staring in stunned silence as officers surrounded the area. Nobody dared to whisper, but the ripple of shock moved through the unit like a chill. Because everyone knew. Contraband alcohol wasn't a small violation. It was the kind of violation that could destroy a man's entire federal case. Diddy was pulled from his bunk and escorted out, still groggy, still confused, still trying to understand why officers suddenly stared at him like he was radioactive. He didn't argue. He didn't resist. He didn't even speak. He just walked, slowly, toward the holding cell, his hands shaking slightly as reality began to settle in. But the outside world realized what happened even faster than the prison itself. A single leaked message, a text sent to someone who definitely shouldn't have sent it, hit social media like an explosion. Breaking, Diddy caught with alcohol inside prison. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. In minutes, millions of eyes were glued to their screens. The headline spread like wildfire. The wildfire became a storm. And the storm became a federal nightmare. But Diddy had no idea. Not yet. Because the real shock, the real disaster, the real irreversible turning point, was already on its way. A report was being delivered to the one man whose decision could decide Diddy's entire future. Judge Aaron Subramanian. And the moment that report hit the judge's desk, everything in this case shifted. Because the moment Judge Subramanian opened that file, he made a decision so fast, so severe, and so explosive, it sent the entire justice system into panic. And Diddy never saw it coming. Judge Aaron Subramanian was not a man who reacted impulsively. He was known for being measured, methodical, and calm even during the most chaotic cases. But when the encrypted message from Fort Dix hit his desk late that morning, something in his expression changed instantly. He opened the report. He saw the photos. He saw the timestamps. He read the officer statements describing the bottle found under Diddy's bunk. His jaw tightened. He didn't push the file aside. He didn't say he needed more context. He didn't ask for additional verification. He simply stood up from his chair and said 6 words that sent shockwaves through SDNY. Reopen the case. Immediately, emergency hearing. Those words spread through the courthouse like wildfire. Clerks dropped what they were doing. Assistants scrambled. Phones started ringing nonstop. One clerk whispered to another, "This is going to be bad, really bad." But back inside Fort Dix, meanwhile, Diddy sat alone in a temporary holding room. The fluorescent lights above hummed quietly. The cold metal bench pressed against his spine. He stared at the floor, breathing shallowly, trying to process how such a small bottle could unravel everything he had left. He kept replaying the moment they pulled it from beneath his bunk, his stomach twisting every time he imagined the towel being unwrapped. He muttered under his breath, voice cracking slightly, "Please, please tell me this isn't happening." But it was happening. And outside that holding room, chaos was erupting in ways he didn't yet know. Because the internet didn't wait for confirmation. It moved with lightning speed, and it moved without mercy. Within an hour, hashtags surged across every platform. Diddy raid. Diddy contraband. Fort Dix scandal. Brewed behind bars. People weren't just reacting. They were analyzing, arguing, mocking, theorizing. Millions of comments, memes, live streams, and reactions poured out. TikTok influencers dramatized the raid. YouTube creators went live, pulling in massive audiences. Gossip sites posted exclusive breakdown using blurry screenshots. Talk shows debated whether other contraband would be found. Everywhere he looked, the internet wasn't simply talking about the scandal, they were inflaming it. And then it got worse. A leaked photo, grainy, clearly taken from inside the prison, appeared on X, formerly Twitter. It showed a guard holding the alcohol bottle in an evidence bag. No one could verify the image. No one knew who leaked it. But the world didn't care. The story had become a global spectacle. Meanwhile, Diddy's lawyer Mark Agnifilo was in Manhattan when his phone began vibrating nonstop. The first alert read, "Breaking, Diddy caught with alcohol in prison." Then more. Reporters, producers, law firms, family members, random unknown numbers claiming to have inside information. But the alert that made his heart stop cold was an email, stamped urgent and marked SDNY. Emergency judicial action, immediate review required. Agnifilo's face went pale. He grabbed his coat. He sprinted out of his office. He already knew this was no small violation. This was a nuclear event. Back at the prison, Diddy finally realized the silence around him wasn't normal. Guards avoided eye contact. The atmosphere felt like something heavy had descended on the entire facility. He whispered again, barely audible, "They're gonna bury me for this, aren't they?" Hours later, the prison doors slammed open as federal marshals arrived to transport him to Manhattan. And as Diddy stepped into the van, shackled and silent, he didn't know that helicopters were already following the route overhead, and that a sea of reporters had gathered outside SDNY waiting to capture the downfall of one of the biggest names in music history. Because the judge wasn't just calling him in. The judge was preparing to decide his future, because when Diddy arrived at the courthouse, he didn't walk into a hearing. He walked straight into a battlefield set against him from every angle imaginable. The black DOJ transport van rolled through Manhattan streets like a moving shadow, escorted by 2 unmarked vehicles on each side. The city was awake, buzzing, and alive, but inside that van, everything felt frozen. Diddy sat strapped to the hard plastic bench, wrists shackled, ankles locked, chains pressed against his jumpsuit with every bump in the road. But the worst part wasn't the restraints. It was the silence. The guards didn't look at him. They didn't speak. They didn't answer a single question he tried to ask. Their silence told him more than words ever could. Something monumental was waiting for him. He leaned his head back against the cold metal wall, eyes staring upward, breathing unsteady. His voice cracked as he whispered to himself, "Please don't let this be the end." Outside, the situation had escalated into full-blown chaos. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, creating a wall of flashing cameras and shouting voices. News stations cut into regular programming with breaking updates. Helicopters hovered above the East River, capturing dramatic aerial shots of the transport van weaving through traffic. The entire world was watching. Because this wasn't just a celebrity scandal anymore. This was a federal crisis. One that could change everything. As the van approached Pearl Street, police created a pathway to force back the swarming media. Dozens of microphones were raised like weapons, ready to strike the moment Diddy stepped out. When the vehicle finally stopped and the back doors swung open, the noise exploded. Diddy, do you have anything to say? Were you really brewing alcohol in your cell? Is your sentence being changed? Are you afraid of what the judge might rule today? Camera flashes exploded, white, blinding, relentless. Diddy lowered his head. He didn't dare look into the cameras. Not today. Not like this. He felt the weight of every lens pointed at him, each one capturing the lowest moment of his life and broadcasting it straight to millions. The marshals tightened their formation around him and began guiding him toward the courthouse entrance. He moved slowly, each step feeling like it dragged a piece of his soul with it. Inside the marble lobby, the atmosphere shifted, but not for the better. The echo of footsteps, the sharp fluorescent lighting, the cold clinical air. Every person who saw him pass by paused. Court clerks whispered to one another. Attorneys stepped aside and stared. Even security officers who usually looked numb to chaos now held tense, rigid expressions. It was like the entire building understood something before he did. This was no ordinary hearing. As the elevator doors closed and the car ascended, Diddy felt his heartbeat pounding in his ears. His throat tightened as he realized where he was headed. Courtroom 14A. Judge Aaron Subramanian's domain. The room where everything would be decided again. When the doors opened and Diddy stepped inside the courtroom, his breath caught. The room was packed wall to wall. Journalists, federal observers, attorneys, officers, reporters squeezed into every available seat. Every eye snapped toward him. The prosecution sat stiff and confident, documents stacked in neat precision, their faces unreadable. They weren't scrambling. They weren't panicking. They were waiting. Waiting with certainty. Waiting with preparation. Waiting with the full force of the government behind them. Meanwhile, Mark Agnafilo, Diddy's lawyer, looked like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was crooked, his hair slightly disheveled, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the rapidly growing mountain of paperwork. When Diddy sat beside him, their eyes locked. There was no reassurance, no "we've got this," no comforting smile. Just fear. Raw, unfiltered fear. Agnafilo leaned in, whispering, "Sean, this is bad, really bad, but stay calm, I'll fight for you." Before Diddy could answer, the room fell silent. The side door opened, and Judge Aaron Subramanian stepped inside. He didn't look angry. He didn't look emotional. He looked resolute, deadly resolute. When he sat down and lifted the case file, the air felt like it thickened around everyone. And then the judge spoke. "This court has been informed of a serious incident requiring immediate review." Diddy felt his entire body tense. Because the storm had finally reached its center, and he was standing directly in the middle of it. Because when the first witness took the stand, everything that followed wasn't just damaging, it was devastating. The judge's voice still lingered in the air when the prosecution rose from their table and called their first witness. There was no dramatic pause, no theatrical build-up, just a quiet announcement that somehow felt heavier than thunder. A senior correctional officer from Fort Dix walked forward, uniform crisp, posture rigid, expression carved from stone. This man didn't look shaken, angry, or proud. He looked certain of what he saw, certain of what he found, certain of what he was about to say. He placed a thick binder on the evidence table, with a heavy thud that made the courtroom snap into even deeper silence. Judge Subramanian nodded. "Proceed." The officer opened the binder. Plastic sleeves, time-stamped logs, photographs. He began speaking in a tone stripped of emotion, professional, procedural, and painfully precise. At approximately 6:18 a.m., November 7th, officers conducted a routine compliance sweep of Unit C. During this sweep, we searched inmate Combs's designated bunk area. He lifted the first photograph. On the courtroom screen appeared a zoomed-in photo of the underside of Diddy's bunk, a towel-wrapped bundle wedged tightly between metal beams. The audience gasped. Even some reporters froze mid-writing. "In this location," the officer continued, "we recovered a bottle containing a fermented liquid substance consistent with improvised alcohol." Diddy shut his eyes. The officer did not slow down. He turned to the next page, another photo. The bottle unwrapped under bright lab lights. Cloudy liquid. Tiny bubbles. Residue. Every detail incriminating. We conducted a secondary search of the mattress, linens, and personal locker. Additional materials were found, including sugar packets, fruit residue, and cloth fibers matching the towel used to wrap the bottle. Agnifilo scribbled notes so fast the pen nearly tore the paper. But even he knew the problem. This wasn't amateur contraband. This was evidence with structure, method, and intent. The next exhibit projected onto the screen made the entire courtroom lean forward. A thermal imaging scan. Most of the cell area glowed blue, except one spot, beneath the bunk glowing faint orange. "Fermentation generates heat," the prosecutor explained. "This thermal signature indicates active production before the raid." Judge Subramanian stared at the image with an expression that chilled the air around him. Not shocked, not angry, but disappointed. Very disappointed. The officer continued, flipping to the final page. "This report documents the violation: possession of contraband alcohol, deliberate concealment, and evidence of purposeful preparation." His voice carried no excitement. Just facts. Cold, clean, devastating facts. Agnifilo rose for cross-examination, trying to poke holes. "Officer, at any point did you see Mr. Combs create this mixture?" "No, sir." "Could someone else have placed the bottle beneath his bunk?" "Unlikely. The towel had only one set of fingerprints." A subtle wave of dread swept the courtroom. "Only one set. Only his." Agnifilo's shoulders sagged for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Diddy to see the fear behind the attorney's practiced professionalism. The officer stepped down, leaving behind a trail of evidence so tight, so airtight, that even the defense team recognized the gravity. This wasn't just a violation. This was a blueprint of guilt. Diddy stared at his hands, fingers trembling inside the restraints. His breathing grew uneven, every detail carved deeper into him. He whispered, barely moving his lips, "How do I fight this?" But the worst part, this was only the beginning. Because what came next wasn't just evidence. It was science. Science that didn't bend, break, or feel sympathy. Because the next witness, the federal forensic investigator, didn't just confirm the officer's story. He scientifically proved every piece of it. the courtroom door opened again, not for a guard, not for another officer, but for someone whose presence instantly shifted the energy in the room. A federal investigator from the Bureau of Prisons stepped forward. Clean suit, calm expression, a slim black folder tucked under one arm. This was the man who relied on opinion or memory. He relied on data. And data never hesitates. Data never lies. Data never gets nervous on the witness stand. He was sworn in. He sat down. He opened the folder. The prosecutor stepped aside like someone making room for a surgeon. "State your role for the court," she asked. "I conducted the forensic analysis of the contraband substance, the concealment materials, and the environmental data connected to the November 7th incident involving inmate Combs." Diddy's stomach tightened. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was science. The investigator lifted the first sheet, a chemical breakdown report. The liquid recovered from beneath Mr. Combs's bunk was tested. Our analysis confirmed ethanol levels consistent with improvised prison alcohol, commonly referred to as pruno. He placed the paper under the projector. Numbers filled the screen, ethanol percentages, fermentation indicators, chemical signatures. Tiny, cold numbers with enormous consequences. The mixture also contained traces of citric acid and artificial citrus flavoring, he continued. These compounds match those found in Fanta soda, a known fermentation base in previous contraband cases. A rustle moved through the courtroom. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't guesswork. This was a chemical fingerprint. The investigator flipped to the next page. The towel used to wrap the bottle contained sugar crystal residue and mashed fruit particulates. These indicate intentional insulation of a fermenting substance over multiple days. Diddy felt his throat tighten. His breath hitched. His fingers curled inward, because every detail seemed impossible to deny. But the investigator wasn't finished. He held up another sheet, thermal logs. These records show elevated heat readings directly beneath Mr. Combs's bunk for 3 consecutive nights prior to the raid. Fermentation is an exothermic process. The heat signatures are consistent with active alcohol production. The thermal images flashed onto the screen. Red-orange patches beneath the bunk. 3 nights. 3 readings. 3 confirmations. Agnifillo's pen stopped moving. His jaw tightened. He looked like a man trying to stop a ship from sinking with a paper cup. And the investigator said, almost gently, almost, "We reviewed nighttime movement logs. From 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., Mr. Combs made repeated returns to his bunk area consistent with someone tending to a concealed item." The screen now showed timestamps. Dozens of entries. A pattern that looked unmistakable. Diddy stared at the numbers. Not words. Not opinions. Not angry guards or gossiping inmates. Numbers. Numbers that pointed at him from every direction. Agnifillo rose, desperate to crack even the smallest opening. "Are you stating definitively that my client manufactured this alcohol?" "I am stating," the investigator replied, steady as bedrock, "that all forensic evidence, including chemical, thermal, and behavioral data, aligns with intentional production." Could someone else have put the materials in his bunk? No, the materials were found exclusively in his assigned area with no indication of external handling. Agnifillo's shoulders dropped. For the first time, Diddy's lawyer looked defeated. The investigator closed his folder with a soft snap. But that sound echoed like a hammer in Diddy's chest. Because now the courtroom wasn't dealing with theory. It was dealing with proof. Cold, clinical, unshakable proof. And Diddy felt something heavy settle in his bones, a realization, terrifying and suffocating. There was no going back, because the next witness wasn't a scientist or an officer, it was an inmate. And what he revealed would break Diddy in a way no evidence ever could. The courtroom door opened again, slowly this time. And when the next witness stepped in, the entire room shifted. Not because he was powerful, not because he carried authority, but because he wasn't either of those things. He was an inmate, shackled at the waist, wrists chained, an orange jumpsuit that looked too big for his thin frame. And the moment he entered, you could feel it. This man was terrified. Two marshals guided him to the stand. His hands trembled so badly he could barely raise them to take the oath. His voice shook as he said, "I do." When he sat down, he didn't look at Diddy, not once. Not out of disrespect, but out of fear. Deep, bone-deep fear. The prosecutor approached gently, almost cautiously. "Please state your name." "Leon Parker," he murmured, "Unit C, Fort Dix." "And why are you here today, Mr. Parker?" He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed visibly. "Because..." His voice cracked. "Because I saw things. I saw what he was doing." A ripple of tension moved through the courtroom like electricity. Reporters leaned forward. Pens stopped mid-motion. Diddy's heart slammed against his ribs. "What did you see?" the prosecutor asked softly. Leon took a shaky breath. "I sleep a few bunks down from him. I work the night cleaning shift, so I'm awake when most guys are." He closed his eyes, remembering. "And I'd see him working on something." Diddy stiffened. Agnifilo shot upright, ready to object, but the judge held up a hand. "Mr. Parker, explain what you mean." Leon nodded slowly. "He had this bottle wrapped in a towel. He'd take it out late at night, real quiet, always looking over his shoulder to see if anyone was watching." The prosecutor's voice lowered. "What did it smell like, Leon?" He winced, as if the memory itself hurt. "It wasn't juice, it wasn't soda. It smelled sour, sweet, thick, like something was cooking inside it." A murmur spread across the courtroom. Even the judge leaned back slightly, absorbing the details. Leon continued, voice shaking as he went on. "I saw apples one night. Another night I saw sugar packets. He wasn't sharing it, wasn't bragging. He was hiding it, protecting it." Diddy's head dropped. He wasn't angry. He wasn't glaring at Leon. He just looked broken. Agnifilo shot up. "This is anecdotal. He didn't witness." The judge stopped him sharply. "Let the witness finish." Leon flinched at the interruption. He looked at the floor, voice now barely above a whisper. "I ain't getting anything for this. No deals, no time off. I'm scared to even be here, all right." Those words hit harder than any evidence. Fear meant honesty. Fear meant credibility. Leon finally looked toward the empty space near Diddy, not at him, but near him, as if afraid eye contact might ruin him. "But I also saw him at night," Leon whispered. "He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't calm. He looked like a man who couldn't breathe, like he was falling apart." A long, painful silence spread through the courtroom. And then came the final question. "Mr. Parker, in your opinion, did Sean Combs knowingly create and hide contraband alcohol?" Leon shut his eyes. A beat passed. 2, 3. "Yes," he whispered. He knew exactly what he was doing. It was like the air was sucked out of the room. Agnifilo sagged into his chair. Diddy stared at the table, eyes glassy, chest tight. Because this wasn't just evidence anymore. This was confirmation from someone inside the same walls. Someone who had nothing to gain by speaking. Someone who saw the truth up close. Because after the inmate stepped down, Diddy's lawyer rose for one last desperate attempt to save him, and what he said shook the entire courtroom. When Leon Parker stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom stayed frozen in a kind of stunned silence. Not the silence of respect, but the silence of impact. His testimony didn't come from authority or from science or from policy. It came from fear, from someone living inside the same cold walls as Diddy. Someone who saw the truth when no one was watching. And that truth landed like a hammer. Agnifilo inhaled sharply, a long, shaky breath. He knew the blow had landed. You could read it in the slump of his shoulders, the way his fingertips clutched the edge of the defense table, his knuckles pale from the strain. But then he stood. Slowly, purposefully, with the weight of a man who realized this was his final chance, maybe his only chance, to pull Diddy back from the edge of a cliff. The entire courtroom shifted its attention toward him. Every journalist, every court clerk, every federal observer straightened in their seats. This wasn't just another argument. This was a plea for survival. Agnifilo approached the center of the courtroom. His voice, when it came, was softer than usual, lower, almost trembling but steady enough to carry through the room. "Your Honor," he began, looking directly at Judge Subramanian, "the prosecution has presented a powerful narrative, evidence, data, testimony, and yes, some of it is deeply damaging." A pause. "But it still does not tell the entire story of the man sitting beside me." He gestured toward Diddy. "Not dramatically, not theatrically, just humanly. For months," he continued, "Sean Combs has been living in an environment that isolates and crushes people, an institution that strips away stability, routine, privacy, everything that anchors a human being. This wasn't a violent act. It wasn't a conspiracy. It wasn't an attempt to harm anyone." He stepped closer to the judge, voice growing more emotional with each sentence. "This was a man in pain, a man spiraling, a man trying wrongly, yes, to cope with pressure that most people in this country will never understand." The room remained still, every eye locked on him. "You've seen his psychological evaluations," Agnifilo said, "and you know the mental strain he's under. He didn't build a trafficking ring. He didn't smuggle weapons. He wasn't masterminding some criminal operation. He made a poor, desperate decision because he was drowning." Agnifilo's voice cracked. "Just once. But it was enough. He is not an instigator. He is not a danger. He is a man who is breaking." Diddy's eyes glistened. He blinked rapidly, trying to hide the emotion swelling in him, but it leaked through anyway, the small trembling of his chin, the rise and fall of his chest. Agnifilo paced slowly, his voice now weighed with sincerity and exhaustion. "He has already been punished, humiliated publicly, torn apart by the media, millions of people watching his lowest moment unfold like entertainment. For any other inmate, this would have been an internal disciplinary matter, but for him, it has become a public execution." He pointed gently, almost pleadingly, toward the evidence table. "That bottle doesn't show a criminal mastermind. It shows a man trying to survive a night he didn't know how to get through." Agnifilo turned back to the judge, desperation now carved into every word. "I'm not asking for excuses, Your Honor. I'm asking for mercy, for a second chance, for recognition that Sean Combs is still a human being, one who can be helped, not buried." He exhaled, eyes wet, voice barely holding together. "If you take the rest of his life from him today, it won't be justice. It will be a tragedy." The courtroom didn't breathe. Agnifilo returned to the defense table with slow, defeated steps. He sat beside Diddy, who stared ahead with a haunted, hollow expression. But as powerful as the plea was, the judge's reaction was unreadable. His face didn't soften. His posture didn't ease. He simply folded his hands, looking down at Diddy with an expression that made the room feel colder. Because he wasn't listening to arguments anymore. He was weighing a sentence, a life-changing one, because what happened next wasn't a legal argument. It was Diddy's emotional collapse, the moment everyone realized just how broken he truly was. Judge Subramanian sat completely still, hands clasped, eyes fixed on Diddy in a way that stripped away every layer of confidence, every ounce of composure, every piece of him that once stood tall in the world. The judge wasn't angry. He wasn't impatient. He wasn't even stern. He looked disappointed. And somehow, that expression cut deeper than anger ever could. The air grew heavy, thick with tension so suffocating it felt like the walls were inching closer. Reporters tightened their grip on their pens. The prosecutors straightened their posture. Even the marshals shifted, subtly, but enough to show they sensed something was about to break. And then it happened. Diddy moved. Not much, just a small, shuddering shift, but enough for the chains around his wrists to clink sharply against the metal table. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a crack in ice. His breath grew unsteady, then uneven, then frighteningly shallow. His hands clenched into fists, then unclenched. His body trembled once, then again, like he was trying to fight off something inside himself. Panic, dread, maybe both. And then he collapsed forward, burying his face in his shackled hands. His shoulders shook, not with dramatic sobs, not with loud cries, but with the silent, violent tremors of a man coming apart from the inside. The courtroom froze. Even the sound of the air vents seemed to stop. This wasn't the bold, untouchable mogul the world had watched for decades. This wasn't the confident industry giant who commanded stages and boardrooms. This wasn't the man who built empires. This was a human being unraveling in real time. His breathing hitched. His back shook. He pressed his forehead into his palms, as if trying to hide from the entire world. A low, broken sound escaped him, barely audible, but enough to turn every head. A whispered plea, trembling and raw. "Please, please." His lawyer moved toward him instinctively, but stopped, because even he didn't know what to say, how to soothe, how to reach someone drowning in fear. The marshal stepped closer, giving him a bit more room, sensing how fragile he had become. And for the first time, even the prosecutor's expression softened, not out of sympathy, but because what they were witnessing wasn't victory. It was devastation. Judge Subramanian's gaze remained steady. If the emotional collapse affected him, he didn't show it, but there was something new in his eyes. Not mercy, not cruelty, a quiet finality, as if the judge had already made the decision in his heart. But he wasn't done yet. He slowly lifted the thick case file, flipping through the pages one final time. He examined the photos, the reports, the logs, the witness statements, all of it slowly, methodically, deliberately. Then he closed it. The soft thud of the folder shutting felt louder than any gavel strike. He removed his glasses, polished them with a cloth, then placed them back on with the care of someone preparing to deliver a sentence that would echo for the rest of a man's life. "Mr. Combs," he said quietly. Diddy didn't move. "Mr. Combs," the judge repeated. A marshal touched Diddy's shoulder gently. He lifted his head slowly, eyes red, face strained, breathing shaky and uneven. And the judge delivered a line that made the entire courtroom instinctively hold its breath. "Please stand." The marshals helped him up. His legs shook, his hands trembled, his eyes flickered with pure terror as he faced the bench. Because he knew. Everyone knew. This wasn't just about a violation anymore. This was judgment, because the next words coming out of Judge Subramanian's mouth would determine whether Diddy still had a future, or whether his life was about to end inside a prison wall.